And beautiful. So I might get a bit of a head start because I know that you're probably all on your lunch break at the moment or taking a bit of a break from work, and I don't want to take up too much of your precious time. But yeah, thank you for joining us. And if you've joined us last week, you're familiar with the Lunch and Learn webinar series. But for anyone that didn't get a chance to join us last week, or for anyone that just wanted a little bit of a reminder, I just wanted to run through quickly what we covered last week, very briefly. So last week we looked at the job seeker assessment. This included some of the following topics: assessing available information when meeting with the job seeker, reassessing existing job seekers, so instances where new information comes to light or there's any changes in circumstances that might mean that we need to look at a JSID or an ESAT, getting all my letters mixed up today. Also conducting the actual assessment and strategies for running successful appointments. For today, we'll be looking at resilience and self-care. So to give you a little bit of an overview of what we'll be covering in the next sort of 40 to 45 minutes, we'll be looking at what is resilience, understanding stress, traits of resilient people, applying resilience and when we might need resilience. And we'll be looking more specifically at 3 strategies that we can use to help build our resilience. So this includes the GEM strategy, the 4-factor approach, the Thrive model, and after that we'll go into some self-care, why is it so important, and what can we be doing better to improve on our self-care. And finally, at the end, of course, we'll have a couple minutes for some questions. But I might get stuck into it. So what is resilience? Basically, resilience is the ability to face adversity, adapt and grow. So I'm sure most of us have been in situations where we've seen people that are dealing with high stress or trauma, but seem to do it in a very calm and collected manner, whereas other people seem to kind of come undone in that same situation. And I'm sure a lot of us recognize ourselves in either one of the two. Basically, what we're looking at here is what we psychologists call resilience. So resilience can be defined as the psychological quality that allows some people to be knocked down by the adversities of life and come back at least as strong, if not stronger than before. So for resilience, we really need to look at stress. So stress is that nice buzzword that we hear everywhere and we're familiar with, but it's sort of tricky to pin down at times. But in the very basics, stress can actually be quite helpful to us. So research suggests that we actually work more effectively when we're under a bit of pressure and stress. If we're feeling no stress at all whatsoever, it sometimes means that we're just not well engaged with what we're doing, or not that motivated in what we're doing, which in turn means that we're just not doing it very well or performing as well as we'd like potentially. Conversely, too much stress also makes it difficult to function. So if we're finding that we have very high stress levels or a lot of anxiety in our life, then that might mean that our performance is declining and we're just not able to meet the demands as much as we'd like. So if you look at that nice little graph on the right hand side there, what we're looking to gain out of stress, hopefully, is that kind of peak performance in the middle where we have just about the right stress. It's not too little, which means that we might not care too much about what we're doing, and it's not too much where it's stopping us from moving forward. But a bit of stress basically means that our body is rising to the occasion and helps us to do the work that we need to do. So when we look at the resilient person, what we look at is traits, qualities and characteristics of the resilient person. So I just want to say that it's not some magical person that possesses all of these traits and qualities. It really, these that we're covering here are really just traits and characteristics that we see across a lot of people with resilience. It doesn't mean that they have everything. It might be that they just possess a few of these, but these are some of the sort of more common qualities that we would see in a resilient person. So the resilient person is someone that's viewing change as a challenge or opportunity. They're generally quite committed and engaged in what they do. They recognize the limits to their control. They engage the support of others, so they're not afraid to ask for help and reach out. They generally hold personal or collective goals and quite driven people. They tend to demonstrate self-efficacy. Generally very patient people when dealing with stress. You often have to be quite patient and have a calm mannerism about yourself. They also possess the adaptability to change. They're quite faithful, sometimes in the way of not necessarily so in a religious or spiritual sense, but in the sense of having a sense of hope and belief that tomorrow can be a better day. Often very optimistic. They also often have a good sense of humor, so the ability to kind of laugh at things that occur around us, or have a bit of a laugh at themselves and not take things too seriously always. So in addition to those traits, couldn't fit them all on the screen. So a couple of additional ones include having the capacity to make realistic plans, being able to carry out those plans, being able to effectively manage their feelings and emotions in a healthy manner. Having good communication skills, I think that's a fairly self-explanatory. If we need to be able to communicate how we feel with others and reach out for help, we need to be able to do that in a good manner. And then having confidence in their strengths and abilities, and having good problem-solving skills. So again, being resilient doesn't mean having all of these traits, but having a few of these is quite common and quite helpful in managing stressful situations in our lives. So when we look at applying resilience and when we might need resilience, we often see areas where we're in sort of a high stress or demanding situation. This can be in our personal lives, it can be in a relationship, it can be at work. I think a lot of us at this time have been experiencing a lot of stress because it's a high workload and we don't have the structure and routine that we necessarily have in place that helps us manage that. So we might see that we're experiencing some more stressful situations. It's also very important to be resilient when facing challenges and setbacks, when facing failure, at a time of job loss. And I think, in the industry of employment services, this is very prominent, especially right now. There's a lot of people coming through the system that maybe haven't ever been without a job, or they didn't see this coming. And losing your job is a very stressful situation, and being resilient means that you can kind of pick yourself back up and keep going. It's also important to have resilience when dealing with mental health or mental illness. At the time of a disaster, through the death of a loved one, when experiencing trauma, family relationship breakdowns, when experiencing bullying or harassment, or when experiencing physical injury. So it's not just a matter of recovering physically from an injury, but it's also recovering emotionally in that space as well. So these are unavoidable life events. It doesn't mean that resilience is magically going to make them go away, or we're going to avoid all of these events. It really just means that we have the ability to get back up and keep going, and find solutions and ways around the barriers that are created due to experiencing some of these events. Okay, so we might get stuck into the first strategy. Very nice and simple one. It's called the GEM strategy. It's just a very simple way to build resilience. So when we look at GEM, we look at the letters. So obviously we've got G for gratitude, so practicing gratitude. So we see that there's a lot of studies out there that show the positive effects of practicing gratitude. So people that generally practice gratitude through writing it down or writing letters for kind of gratitude purposes generally have higher senses of happiness and life satisfaction, and they generally have fewer symptoms of depression, so things like low mood, difficulties with concentration and attention, or difficulties with sleeping, and so on. So it can be really easy. Practicing gratitude doesn't have to be big and fancy in any way. It really can be something as simple as, towards the end of the day, before going to bed, either going through sort of in your mind or writing down on paper 3 things that you're appreciative of, or that you felt that you were grateful for. It can be something that you're grateful for in your life, or just for that day specifically. If we move on to the E, we've got cultivating empathy, so being kind to others. So again, we see that the research is pretty clear in this area. So people that are kind and compassionate towards others generally experiences higher sense of well-being, higher levels of optimism, greater life satisfaction, and decreased symptoms of anxiety, and also greater sense of connectedness and peer acceptance. And I think that one is fairly self-explanatory. If we're kind to others and we care for others and we're showing empathy towards others, we're probably going to get that in return and build some pretty amazing relationships with other people. And finally, being mindful. So taking some time to focus on the present moment. So it doesn't have to be practicing meditation and mindfulness for hours at a time by any means. It can be something really simple. Some people do enjoy using mindfulness apps or podcasts. And for others, it's really just about taking a minute to kind of let go of the worries of the future and let go of the ruminations of what happened in the past. So really simple mindfulness could just be sitting down in the quiet, listening to the sounds around you, trying to work out what smells that you can sense, or what things that are around you, or washing the dishes in a way where you're kind of feeling the soap against your skin and the warm water against your skin. So it's really just taking the time to be in the present. We've got the second strategy, which is the 4-factor approach. So basically, when we look at the 4-factor approach, we look at reframing the situation in a way that it doesn't impact on your emotional and physical well-being in that sense. So we want to provide an opportunity for reframing the way we think. And as psychologists, we know that the way we think is very much connected to how we feel and how we behave. So the 4-factor approach is just breaking that down a little bit. So I think my colleague here has put a nice little example on the screen. So for example, if you're involved in an accident, crash your car, you might get some bruising. There's no major dramas, but it's a pretty stressful event. Anyone that's ever been in a car accident knows that it's not something that's pleasant, and it can definitely shake us up a fair bit. So if we look at that from the 4-factor approach, step 1 is really listing or talking about the situation without magnifying it. So bringing it down to the facts, stating the facts, and trying to not catastrophize or ruminate too much about it. So it could be something as simple as, saying to yourself that I wrecked my car and I got hurt. I was able to call for help and I got myself patched up and got the car fixed, and that was that. Second step is taking ownership, but without beating ourselves up. So placing the blame where it belongs. So in this instance, it might be that, yeah, okay, I wrecked my car, it happens. It was stuck, it was an accident, and I'm okay. Third step being reframing and reevaluating the event in your mind. So really looking for silver linings. It's not necessarily an easy thing to do, especially if you're in a stressful environment or in a stressful event. But there's often, when we really break it down, we can often kind of reframe it in a way of finding those positives within it. So in this instance, we've got things could have been worse. I could have been seriously injured or hurt someone else. So when we look at it in that sense, then yeah, of course, it's awful being in an accident, but it could have been so much worse. And we actually got out fairly scot-free in this regard. And that's something that we can be grateful for. And finally, giving yourself time to heal. So not rushing into recovery per se as well, allowing yourself time to heal and adjust after the event. Depending on the event, this might take more or less time. After a car accident, we might have to both physically and mentally recover, but rushing that is just going to mean that we're probably putting more stress and pressure on ourselves than is necessary. Same as if we lose someone close to us, we need time to grieve. It's part of the process. So being kind to ourselves in that regard and allowing ourselves that time. Then finally, we got the third strategy, which is the Thrive model. So a lot of people attended the Thrive and Uncertainty webinar by our very own Dr. Kylie Henderson, which was a great turnout. So if you are interested in learning a little bit more about the Thrive model in particular, this webinar is available on YouTube, so I would definitely encourage you to check that one out as well. So we'll just do a bit of an overview of this one. I won't go too much into depth, but I do think it's an important one, so I wanted to cover this one off as well. So when we're looking at the Thrive model, we'll look at sort of including 6 different strategies for remaining resilient in the face of stress. So another acronym, but if we get through it in terms of sort of, we'll start at the top. Time management. In regards to time management, it's often that when we are in stressful situations, we tend to avoid doing things that are unpleasant on top of it because we're already under stress, we're not feeling great about it. But by really looking at a time management, we can actually help ourselves feel better and be more resilient and move forward. So writing a to-do list can be really helpful and ordering it by priority. Big tip here is to do the hardest and most urgent task first. Often a lot of people tend to want to tick off those nice, quick, easy tasks, and that can be nice as well, but it really does help get through a to-do list and get through the tasks that you need to do if you start with the hardest one, because everything else after that becomes so much easier. Then we've got the helpful thinking side of things in the ABC model. So really, as psychologists, we know that there's a really, like I mentioned before, really strong link between thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. So sometimes we act on things or we experience those feelings, but we don't really know where they're coming from. So breaking this down a little bit can help us understand why we're feeling the way we're feeling and help us reframe that in a way that's going to make it a bit easier to cope with. So a situation that I think a lot of us have been in, you know, you have a job seeker that's a bit upset and they might be yelling and not really wanting to listen to what you have to say. So that situation where your job seeker yells at you, it can be really stressful. And often we see that, you know, we experience some beliefs and thoughts like, I'm failing them, I can't cope, I don't know what to do. And the consequent feeling might be a feeling of low mood, anxiety, frustration, sadness, anger. But if we really break that down, we can look at what's going on, but we can also reframe it. So once we know what's happening for ourselves internally, we can also look at it in terms of, okay, well, what's really going on here? Maybe it is that the job seeker had a really bad day, they're not feeling very well, they're very stressed themselves, so they're feeling a lot of shame around having to ask for help, and they don't really know how to cope with it. So we can reframe that and look at it in terms of, do I really need to take the blame for this? Or is there a more helpful way of looking at it right now? R stands for relaxation. So there's so many different ways that we can practice relaxation, of course. But one of my favorites is progressive muscle relaxation. So for anyone that hasn't tried that before, I would highly recommend it. The basic concept is progressively tensing and releasing muscles from your head to your toes. So the reason why we might do this is because when we're experiencing a lot of stress and anxiety, we tend to hold a lot of tension and we start to feel actual physical pain in our bodies. When we're in stressful situations, we're on a heightened level, we're ready to go, but we might not be tense enough that we really kind of register what's going on. So we're just on that middle level, which if we have that long term, it's going to cause some pain and some further stress and frustration. So to help mitigate that, what we can do is engage in progressive muscle relaxation. It doesn't have to take long, it can be a couple of minutes. You know, it can be once a day or it can be as you need, but I do recommend kind of getting into the habit of doing this a bit more often. And basically all you need to do is sit down in a quiet place where you have some space to just not be interrupted. It might be easier said than done. I realize a lot of you are working from home, there's kids around, other family members around, but if you do have someone where you can just sit for a couple of minutes and not be interrupted, or lay down before going to sleep, for example. Really it's just starting from the top and tensing up your forehead, going down to your neck, your shoulders, and you go through your body and really kind of tensing that up and holding that tight and then letting go. And that way we help signals being sent between our brain and our body to really release that tension. So if you haven't tried that, it's definitely a recommendation to give that a go. Increase your connectedness. It's really about having a sense of belonging. So it might be with your family, it might be in your friendship group, workplace, sporting teams. It's really just finding a place where you feel a sense of belonging, that you feel like you are around people that have the same values as you or the same interests as you. And that brings me to the next one, values as well. Knowing your values and beliefs really can give us a greater sense of purpose and drive in life. So really, if you haven't thought about it before, consider areas of health, family, finance, career, parenting, community, etc., and look at what's important to me. Am I someone that really values that sense of belonging, or am I someone that values that sense of achievement? And if we know what our values are, it's so much easier to let our values drive our lives than the other way around. Finally, enjoyment, engaging in enjoyable activities. I can't stress this enough. It's something that it's often the first thing to go, because if we have a lot of other things, a lot of to-dos, then we don't necessarily make time for enjoyment. But really just taking a few minutes or half an hour a day to do something just for the fun of it, just because you enjoy it, really helps us to build that resilience. And of course, as you can see on the screen there, on top of that, having a balanced diet to recover really helps us to kind of balance that model out. So that's resilience in a very kind of short, condensed space. But I wanted to also cover self-care, because the two are very much interconnected. So resilience is really what we do and how we act and how we move forward, where self-care is the strategies that we can engage in to build our resilience and build our well-being. So we've covered a few of them, but I'd like to just break it down a little bit further so that we can look at that in terms of 5 different domains, and just some tips in regards to how you can implement some more self-care strategies in your life. Before we get into that, I just wanted to say that self-care is an activity that we do deliberately in order to take care of our mental, emotional, physical, social well-being. It is care of oneself without medical or other professional consultation. Doesn't exclude that. Can definitely do that in addition to self-care, but self-care is really what you do for yourself. Self-care is not something that we force ourselves to do or something that we don't enjoy. Really important point, because I think a lot of the time we get stuck in this mindset of, oh, I should be doing something because it's good for me. And yeah, absolutely, you might think that I need to get into some more physical activity, but if you really don't like going to the gym and lifting weights, that's not a self-care activity to engage in that. Maybe it's a good chance to take a step back and think, okay, well, I need to engage in some physical activity, but how can I do that in a way that's going to be enjoyable for myself? So maybe taking a dancing class, or going for a swim, or taking a walk with a friend is a better activity than doing something that is related to physical activity but that you don't quite enjoy. It's also not an emergency response plan or something that when stress becomes overwhelming and you're close to burnout that you start to engage in. So it's not a last resort. It's what I like to look at in terms of more of a proactive and preventative measure rather than a reactive. So we want to do something that's promoting our self-care every day and every week. It's not something that we should do when we're already in that space of burnout or stress. Often that's a bit late in that regard. But in saying that, it's never too late to start implementing some self-care. So why is self-care so important? We've covered a lot of this before, but it's worth saying it again. It gives us a greater capacity to manage stress. It increases our resilience, it reduces symptoms of mental health problems, and it also improves our immunity and physical health. So there are a lot of simple and easy ways to implement self-care in your day or week. So we can see here on the right side a few little ones to kind of get started with that covers a few different domains. So something like asking for help, spending time alone, putting yourself first, asking for what you need and reaching out, setting boundaries, staying at home if we need to, saying no, forgiving ourselves, and taking a step back if we need to. But I'd like to break that down a little bit further. So we'll get into the 5 domains and how we can kind of implement some self-care in each domain. So if we look at the workplace, and I think implementing some self-care in the workplace is probably more important than ever. And self-care really isn't something that we do just outside of work or during our own time. It's something that we can kind of implement in all different areas of our lives. So a couple of little tips and tricks is, when it comes to self-care in the workplace is setting and enforcing strict boundaries between job seekers and yourself. Boundaries is so important. And it's that analogy, and if you've ever been on an airplane, you've heard this a million times as well, putting the mask on yourself before you can help someone else. If we're not taking care of ourselves, we're not going to be in a position to help others. So that might mean that if a job seeker comes in during your lunch hour and asks for help, that you actually let them know that happy to help you. I'm just on my lunch now. So if you want to wait or come back, we can do it later, but I just don't have the ability to assist you with this right now because I need to take a break. In addition to this, attending staff meetings. There's a few different reasons why this is kind of part of self-care. One is being in the know, knowing what's going on in your workplace, and being on top of things. So there's really nothing worse than kind of being left out and not really sure what you're meant to be doing or what's happening. It's also a chance to connect with your colleagues and your managers. And as I say, you know, a lot of staff meetings, there's a perfect opportunity to provide some feedback or to bring up some things that you might have noticed that maybe your colleagues or manager haven't had a chance to see. And that might help to build a better sense of well-being in the workplace. Also taking some time to allocate or taking allocated lunchtime, so to speak, preferably outside in the sun or around other people. This is probably one of the biggest ones for me, and I think employment services is pretty bad with this, and I definitely can say that I've been guilty of this a few times, but eating lunch at your desk while doing work isn't really self-care. So I know that you're incredibly busy and know that you have a lot of things to do, but often when we do that, we're not more effective or efficient. We're actually, it's very counterproductive. We need to take breaks and we need to take time away from our work tasks to be the best version of ourselves in our workspace. So taking some time to just enjoy your lunch is probably the quickest and easiest self-care tip I can give you. Taking regular breaks as well to just stretch and move around. So a lot of us are just sitting in front of the computer all day. So for our physical well-being, to get up, move around, kind of move our body and get rid of some of that tension is really important. So that leads me into physical self-care. When it comes to physical self-care, one of the most important things is developing a regular sleep routine. So when we're not sleeping well, we're just not going to be at our best. So the best way to look at our sleep routine is to see what am I doing now and where can I improve it. So it might be, you know, checking, am I going to sleep around the same time every night and waking up around the same time every morning, so that I have a sense of this is the time when I'm sleeping and when I'm resting. It's also looking at, you know, is it sufficiently dark? Is it quiet? Is it a good temperature in the bedroom? Are there other things that are going to disrupt my sleep? And also not spending time in your bedroom during the day, not, you know, being on your phone on your bed or watching Netflix or doing work in the bedroom, because it does confuse our brains in terms of knowing when it's time to sleep and rest and when it's time to be active and do things. So separating the two can be really, really helpful for managing a better sleep routine. Aiming for a healthy diet. Again, this is not an all or nothing. It doesn't mean that you have to eat veggies strictly or have to get into some really strict dieting here. It just means that we need a bit of a balanced diet. So getting some good greens in, having sufficient water during the day, not just drinking coffee and Red Bull, but just having some good minerals and nutrients in our diet. Again, taking lunch breaks, going for a walk at lunchtime. So it might just be around the block or around the building or up and down the hallway. It doesn't have to be a long walk. It can be 5 minutes. But it's just to break up your day and to get some of that physical movement in. Using your sick leave when needed. I think this is probably more relevant than ever, because I think a lot of people would say if you're sick, stay at home. We don't really want you at work if you're sick. But it is important at all times. It's better to take a day off to recover than it is to push through and go into work for the rest of the week and be on half speed because you're not well enough to function properly. So it's important to have that conversation with your manager. If you're not well, maybe it's better to take a day off. And then finally, engage in regular physical activity. Might be going to the gym, going for a walk or run, or playing in the backyard with your kids. Doesn't have to be anything big or fancy here either. It's just about movement and moving our bodies. And this is so important when we're working in an office space as well. When it comes to emotional self-care, really big one is spending time with supportive friends and family. So people that makes us feel good about ourselves and encourages us and pushes us to do better rather than the ones that drain our energy. Coming back to gratitude, so practicing gratitude, 3 things that you're grateful for each day, you know, whether it's last thing that you do at night or the first thing that you start with in the morning to kind of set your day off on the right path. Engaging in activities that make you feel happy, so coming back to that enjoyment and the Thrive model again. Doesn't have to be anything that achieves anything or anything that has a purpose. It's just about something that you enjoy and that you get some good, nice feelings from. On the other side as well, engaging in activities that boost your confidence, so things that makes us feel like we have made an achievement or we're progressing towards our goals can be really helpful for our emotional self-care. And then finally, engaging in conversation with people close to you about how you're coping with work and life demands. It's so much better to let the people around us know what's going on and kind of give them a bit of a heads up if things are a bit stressful right now. Because if they're not aware of what's going on, they can't do anything to help you. But if you do let your boss know that, you know, it's a very stressful period right now, they might be able to make some allowances or support you to be able to achieve your goal rather than adding on extra stress and pressure. Spiritual self-care, again, doesn't have to be religious, can be, it's beautiful if it is, but it can also just be sort of that belief of something greater than ourselves, so just that connection with nature. So great self-care for our spiritual selves is engaging in reflective practices like meditation, spending time in nature, going for a walk on the beach or in the forest, practicing yoga, reflecting with a friend, a close friend for support. So again, I mean, kind of covering a lot of the same topics here, but it's just about that connectedness and how we can link all of these things in to help improve our self-care. And then we've got relationship self-care. So prioritizing close relationships in your life. Again, this is so important because, I mean, if you want to have that support from their side, it's important that you're also kind of providing that back and you're there for the people that you care about. And that might mean attending the special events of your family and friends. I know it's not always super exciting to go to your nephew's 5th birthday on a Saturday, but it is a really nice way to manage that self-care for your relationship. And often when we do get there, we realize that, oh, it's quite a nice thing, you know, you're around people that are optimistic, so it's a joyful activity, something good is happening. So I would say that attending the special events of your family and friends is a really good self-care tip for that. Picking up the phone and making a phone call to a close friend, family member, colleague, again, more important than ever, because we can't necessarily see people face to face, or it might be that they're not close to us, they might be in another state or in another country. Just picking up the phone, you know, to mom and dad or sibling or to best friend, and just having 5 minutes on the phone and just checking in is a really good way to manage your relationships and make sure that they're in a good, nice, healthy state. And then putting the phone down. What I mean when I say that is just putting it away. We don't need to be on social media at all hours of the day. If we're sitting with someone in the lunchroom or at night with our kids or partners, it's just better to be able to kind of put that away and spend quality time with the people we care about, and it will help us build strong relationships. So that's pretty much the main things from me today. So I just wanted to leave you with a little bit of a take-home message and some actionable strategies that we've covered today. So we've covered resilience and self-care from a perspective of what it is, and more importantly, how you can implement this for yourself. It might be that you're doing a lot of these things already, but it's good to take inventory and check, am I crossing off some self-care across all of those domains, or are there areas that I can improve in? And also in terms of the resilience, what can I do to kind of help build this? We all need resilience right now and throughout our lives. So there's some of those great strategies for building that. So we've covered the GEM strategy, the 4-factor approach, the Thrive model, and we've also looked at some actionable self-care strategies across the 5 domains of work: emotional, physical, spiritual, and social well-being. So what now? I would really like for you guys to take some time this afternoon to reflect on at least one, but preferably a few of the strategies that we've talked about today that you can implement immediately to help build your resilience and maintain your well-being across these areas of your life. I just really wanted to highlight that resilience is not a trait that we're born with. It's not something that just a special few people get to enjoy. Rather, it's a combination of skills, traits, and characteristics that we can all improve on and nurture and develop, which will help us to better manage adverse situations in the future. So before I get into what we're covering next week, I just wanted to stop and see if there's any questions on any of the topics that we've covered today. Feel free to put that in the little chat box. No? Well, I'll take silence as a good thing, and hopefully I've covered off a lot of these things today that are going to be valuable for you when reviewing your own self-care. But if there are any questions coming up from this, or if you want to review the video again, do reach out to us and let us know, and we're happy to send it your way so that you can kind of start implementing this for yourself or sharing it with family and friends. You know, the more the merrier. So thank you so much for joining me. Before I let you go today, I just wanted to also highlight that our next webinar is on motivational interviewing. So what we'll be covering is the basics of motivational interviewing, models of change, when and how you can use motivational interviewing, and how these strategies can be applied to your work with job seekers in person and through telehealth delivery. So it'll be a really good topic, and I hope a lot of you can join us for that. So if there's no final questions, I might leave you to it. I'm sure you want to get through your lunch and get back to work. But thank you again for joining me.